to Serendipity Intended. My name is Tracy Ann, and today is day 2 of Dephemerember. So let's go ahead and take a look at the prompt list for today. You might notice there are some yellow stickies as we flip through. Those stickies are just placeholders for me to keep track of where I think I might like to do a page. And so here we are at the prompt list. Now I did, in the last video, I forgot to include the number 1 for day 1. And so I went ahead and added that after I'd already made the video. But here we are with the prompt list, and you can see that it's floating pockets and bold numbers. And the page that I selected for that is actually a little bit further back. So this postcard that was here is one from the box of oplotki that I used to make the journal. But in order to work on this page, first I really needed to do something with that left-hand side. It was just entirely too white. So I thought that this stencil would be pretty, and I'm going to go ahead and use some Distress Oxide in the background. The stencil wasn't quite wide enough, so I decided that I would just stencil from the outside edge in and then figure out what to do with the inner side afterwards. And then I also did want to stabilize it, so I used the washi tape to do that. All right, so this is Distress Oxide Vintage Photo, and I'm not terribly concerned about having completely even coverage. I like the variation within the stencil. I am trying to make sure that there's a lot of really tiny nibbly bits, and I'm trying to make sure that I get those all caught. But in terms of having even shading all the way around the stencil, I'm not terribly concerned about that. And pretty happy with how that turned out. Again, I still need to do something with that right-hand side, but not too bad. So since it's a distressed oxide, I did decide to try and activate the color with water. I have really limited success with that. Oh, there I was worried that I was messing up the digital on the other side with the water. So I didn't quite get the color variation that I wanted, and I also decided that the background was just entirely too white. So using a different color of distress ink, this time I think this is old paper, just to tone down the stark bright whiteness in the background and give it a little bit more texture. And again, I was not really super worried about even coverage, so some of the white peeking through was fine. I just didn't want the whole thing to be bright white. And in the end, I'm just much happier with that. And then decided I needed to go to the other page and at least continue some of that old paper color onto the other page, since visually they felt connected one to the other. So not being terribly precise about what I was doing, just adding a little bit of color, and then decided I wanted some texture, and this sort of rough burlap seemed appropriate given the image on the postcard of the nativity scene. And as you can see, I'm not worrying about covering the entire surface or being terribly precise. I'm really just trying to add some texture and some pattern to the page so that I'm not interacting with a completely blank page. All right, now I needed some paper to make the pocket, and I really thought that mosaic sort of paper was super pretty and the colors matched well. And I'm going to use this heavier cardstock for my floating pocket itself, in part because I think the music paper is a perfect way to sort of line up the page, and also because it's two-sided already, so I didn't have to do anything to get the second side. And it works out pretty perfectly that the width of these three pieces folded into thirds fits just inside of my journal. So I decided to use a scoring board to score this to help me make the folds that I needed to make. I did mark my spots beforehand. So 1, 2, and 3, and then, so this is going to be a 2-pocket floating pocket, and I'm super happy with that. So then I decided to use the scoring tool to help me mark where I wanted to cut, just so that I didn't have to go back later and erase. There is absolutely no precision to this. I just sort of eyeballed where I thought I would want the first pocket to be, and that's where I made the cut. This next pocket I decided to make diagonal, and then I decided I couldn't quite get the corners lined up, so I added with my Sharpie, I added a line so that I could line myself up and be able to do corner to corner. I'm sure there's a fancy way to do that, but that way worked for me. I decided to leave the folded edge in place for this pocket, the edge that I folded over, rather than trimming it off, just to reinforce it a little bit. So yeah, I'm overall really satisfied with the way this pocket turned out. And so now I just need to glue it together. So starting with that folded over triangle and using my art glitter glue just to get that pushed down, and use my bone folder to make sure it's super crisp. Okay, and then gluing down the other edges. But before I do that, I am going to go all the way around the entire thing with a little bit of ink just to distress it a bit. This is probably one of my favorite techniques. I do it in just about everything that I do. I think it adds a little bit of age and substance to the plain paper. And I was just noticing there as I was shooting the video that the back page of that is really plain. And so even though I'm making a floating pocket and it's going to have tags inside of it, I can also use the back of the floating pocket as a place to journal, which is one of the advantages to making the pocket a floating pocket instead of just adhering it to the page. Now, when I make pockets, I tend to prefer to use red tape to secure the edges of my pockets rather than the glitter glue, mostly because I feel like I am less likely to shove things through the red tape as opposed to the glitter glue, and it's cleaner. Now you can see me fighting. This is the one thing that makes me crazy about red tape, is trying to get the backing off of it. I have a tendency to just either not be able to catch it or to lift the adhesive as well as the backing. And then you can see there is our first pocket, and then again the red tape to create the second pocket. I like this really narrow red tape because it secures the edges of the pocket, but it gives me the maximum amount of space to use for whatever it is I'm going to stick inside of it. And it's really only like 1/8 of an inch thick, so it gives me the most space in my pocket for whatever it is that I'm going to stick in. And that is the floating pocket. You can see there's a spot there and a second spot there to insert items. And that's going to go right on the side there. And you can still see a little bit of the stencil peeking out underneath, which I also like, and it matches well with the pocket itself, the colors. So now I've got my journal card, and I decided that I really wanted to feature this and use it as a belly band on the front. So in addition to being a pocket, it also would have a belly band. And this mosaic paper that I had picked out to use is, I think, perfect for making a belly band. Now, originally I was thinking that I would use it just as a border across the top of the pocket, and then I thought, well, that's kind of cute. Maybe I can make a little tuck spot there as well. So, of course, first have to age everything. This helps tie the paper into the pocket itself because it's got the same treatment. And then when I went to put it back in and just sort of make sure I had it folded well, then I realized that maybe I would put it down a little bit further, and that's when I got the idea of using it as a belly band instead of just some trim. So I'm sort of pondering that that's what, in fact, I'm going to do. And so, again, because I'm creating a belly band, I want to make sure that the sides are adhered. So grabbed my trusty red tape, and the pencil markings that I made was just so that I would not put the tape too far over and get it just on the outside edges of where the band sits on the front of the pocket. And then wasn't quite right. I had to tweak it. Fortunately, the tape wasn't too stuck, and I was able to adjust it. And then you can see now I've got 3 places to tuck something. And then I did decide that I was just going to glue the very bottom edge. Now here I did do the glue rather than the red tape, mostly because of the points at the end. I was afraid that would be a little bit fiddly. But you can see it can be a tuck spot, or it could just be decorative. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that pocket, but then decided, okay, it's Christmas time. We need a little bit of shimmer. And so I'm just going to add that to the edges with some art glitter glue, and just to create a little bit of an extra border around that belly band. The glitter that I use is a glitter powder. It's called Champagne Gold. It's by Leobro. And one tip, if you're using glitter, get just a plain piece of paper, fold it first, and put it underneath to kind of catch the glitter. And then you can kind of liberally put the glitter on there, tap it off onto the paper. You have your nice finished piece. And then it's super easy to get the glitter back inside. And I apologize, that paper got really close to the camera there. Okay, now that needs to just sit a bit and dry. And now it's time to do something for the tags. So I grabbed a bunch of items. The prompt is for bold numbers as well as that floating pocket. I love the idea of using paint strip as a tag. I do it frequently, and I thought the colors for this one worked really well. And so just kind of marking a spot. I am doing this upside down, and also really love the idea of a super, super bold number there. I was thinking about using that number 4 just as a bold number. And again, gotta make it a good tag. So I decided to use the same paper that I had for the pocket, but the back side of it. So not the music side, but the sort of lightly printed back side, because I thought that would make a great surface again to journal on. So put some glue onto the paint strip, adhered that to my two-sided paper, and then just trimmed off the extra. And then that way I have a nicely backed tag. And again, using my Distressed Oxide Vintage Photo, that's the color I've been using for everything to edge it, edging this the same way. And you'll see that throughout all of the little tags that I make here. Now, I like the dark blue at the top, and I also liked the upside downness of the paint strip. So I'm going to use it upside down. I also grabbed my burlap stencil again, just to tie that into the sort of facing page. And then, yeah, I think that's really fun. But then I also realized that this was day 2 and I was using the number 4. So instead I grabbed a foam stamp that I have in a really large size and in a number 2, so that I could have the right number on the page. And so I'm going to stencil that onto, again, that same paper, just using a folk art acrylic paint in, I think that was pure black. And so I just going to paint it onto the number to make sure that I have really good even coverage, because I do want that number to pop and not be sort of thin. I want the black to be really bold and solid. That's why I decided to go with paint rather than with an ink pad. On the foam stamps, I have better success with paint. So then that needed to dry. Acrylic doesn't take too long to dry, but it does take a little while. And in the meantime, I decided that I would go ahead and use the remnant of the paint strip to create a tag for the tuck. So again, using the same paper to back this tag as well. Although this one I think I'm going to place in so that the stripes on the paint chip go vertically rather than horizontally. Just for a little bit of variety. Now I needed something on this tag to give it a little bit of something. Decided maybe I would use that mosaic on the larger tag, but I needed to do something with the smaller tag as well. So of course have to edge the tag first, get that all done, and then I sort of liked that dark blue strip as a border, and I wanted to kind of continue that idea. I also wanted to see what else I could do with the idea of bold numbers, and I remembered I had this sort of roller stencil So I thought that would be fun to use to create some additional bold numbers on the tag. And so now with this, because I'm stenciling as opposed to using a foam stamp, I did decide to go ahead and use an ink pad. I also taped the paint chip down because it was so small. I felt it was going to be a little scoochy. So I just went ahead and used some blue tape to hold everything down so that I wasn't fighting with it. And then grabbed my ink. This is one of my favorite black inks. It's called Wicked Black, and it's by Colorbox. And then I changed my mind and decided, just because of the glossiness of the paint chip, that I would use this Ranger Archival ink in jet black instead. It's a little less smeary, and I thought that would be a safer bet on the paint chip. And then realized that I wasn't happy with the color, or the depth of color, so I went back to the Wicked Black from Colorbox. Decided that black was a little bit more black. So just trying to make sure that I get in all the little tiny spots with that sponge. And then the moment of truth comes. See how it turned out. And overall, I am pleased with how that turned out. Do have that little bit of black on the chip itself where I sort of got a little overzealous, but it's fine. So the 2 still was a little wet, so I decided I would finish with the smaller tag. I do like the way that it looks, but it seemed like it needed something else. It's a little bit darker of a color. And I had this little bit, and it's green, which is kind of new color, but I decided to introduce that anyway and cut a little tiny strip off of that just to add a little bit of an edge. Now, because it's two-sided, I did want to play with which side I liked better, the more neutral side or the green side. And then decided ultimately that the green had a little bit more of a punch to it. So trying to erase that ink stain. I didn't get it completely off, but I did get it mostly off. All right, so again, using my art glitter glue. To adhere that edge down and then trim off the extra. And a little bit of distressing on the ends. And that tag is pretty much done. And now with the number 2 definitely dry, go ahead and trim that to size. I apologize, this is cut off a little bit. So I think the beige background makes the number pop more than the black background of the number 4 that I was originally going to do. Again, add a little bit of distressing around the edge, and then I want to use these mosaics to add a little bit of trim. I decided I wanted a torn edge for the outside. I did end up tearing the paper a little bit and I ended up having to do a little bit of a band-aid job on the back to repair that. So marking the spot where I am going to put that paper back, and then, like I said, grabbing a teeny piece of washi tape just to repair that tear so it's not obvious. And then I can go ahead and glue it down. And then put my number 2. I'm super happy with that. And she fits nicely into the page. Now, I did decide that it needed something, and also that repeating that glitter in a second place would be a good idea. So I went around the outside edge of the 2 just to kind of create a bit of a border. And then I used the same champagne gold glitter powder that I had on the belly band around the outside edge of the number 2, just to tie those 2 elements in together. A little brush to dust off some of the extra glitter. It does get everywhere. Right? And then give that a chance to dry, and I cleaned up. Right, so I needed a tag for that second pocket, and I originally thought maybe I would use some of the vintage postcards that I had, insert that in there, but I decided it was just too tall and I didn't want to trim it down, so I set that idea aside. Then I remembered that in my Christmas stash I have a box of flats, or just things that I can use to make tags with, and so I went searching through that box just to try and find some things that I thought might work, and I pulled out those items that I thought might work, both in terms of the width and also the height of them. And so again, just pulled a few things out that I thought might work color-wise or be interesting. And so then, of course, you got to audition everything, and certainly with the other items. So I went ahead and put the 2 tags that I already had in place, and then just sort of tried to figure out what would work. And this one worked fairly well, although it would need to be trimmed somewhat. That one, size-wise, was a little too skinny, and the color was just off. I liked that one, but it was too wide. This one also felt like maybe I could trim it down and make it work. So I ended up with both of these 2 options, and just kind of playing with, okay, well, what will work, what will make sense. And so I decided I really needed to trim this so that I could get a better sense of what it was going to look like in the space. The nice thing about a tag like this is that you can trim from both sides and you still end up with a symmetrical tag. So that's what I did. And this is a digital, so if I want the full-size tag, I can always just print another one. And bonus, even if I decide not to use it, I've already got it cut out and it's ready to go for something else. So tucking that in, like size-wise it fit. I could have shortened it a bit. But I just wasn't sure that I really liked it. I thought the colors were kind of washed out. So I decided to trim down this flat. It's a reproduction. It's not an actual postcard. But I thought using the decal scissors would be kind of fun because that was a big thing back in the day. And then I realized that if I just trimmed off the white on both sides, I would end up with essentially the same width as the tag, and that would be absolutely perfect. All right, so I needed to do something with the back, and I was, to be honest, feeling a little bit lazy, and I didn't want to add anything to the back, especially because I ends. So I just grabbed the burlap stencil that I used, added just a little bit of stencil, not all the way even, but just across the back, so it wasn't just plain stark white. And then went ahead and distressed the edges as I have for all of the other items on the card, front and back. I did decide to cut off the corners in a cream that sort of coordinates with all of the other creams on the top, just to, make it a little more tag-like. So that is my floating pockets and bold numbers. I had a lot of fun following my muse today and creating with you. And I decided I hated the paper clip, and I went and grabbed a bullnose clip. I thought that looked a lot more finished and worked better with a pocket. And there you go. It's my finished page. I hope you have a great day.